Many of us have done something in our lives for which we wish we could take it back. We wish we could do it over. We regret it. Maybe it's traumatized us. And sometimes it's even ruined our lives. And many, many people have gone through this. Have you ever let something in your life that you did define you? And I mean, not define you in a good way. Has it held you back from things that you've wanted to do in your life? I'm going to talk about some of that today because I think it's an important issue. Many, many people, I'm not going to say everyone because not everyone has done this, but many, many people have done something in their lives and they go, I can't get past it. I've done something. It's not so much that I beat myself up for it all the time, but I also just can't get past it. They let it define them. And the thing is, if other people know that you did this thing as well, it can often lead to a problem because they're going to continue to define you that way. When we have something in our past that defines us like that, or that threatens to define us, it's like an albatross hanging around our neck. It's going to ruin something about your life. So we're going to talk about in a few minutes about what to do about that, one way to approach it. But first, I'm going to give you an example. And this time it's something that goes back to my time as a graduate student in counseling. And it's about a guest speaker that we had in one of our classes. And this man held us all just captive by his story because it was so compelling. I mean, this guy completely found a way to redeem himself in his life. So I'll just tell you in brief kind of his backstory. He came to the class. It was actually a class on grieving, which was interesting. But he came to the class and talked about the fact that when he had been growing up, I don't remember, I think it was in Chicago, he was on the streets. He was one of those gang members, punks on the street. He did all sorts of crimes before the time he was even an adult. He had stolen, he had attacked people. And then he actually did something for which he eventually got caught. He actually was involved in the murder of someone. And he was like an accomplice, I believe. This has been like over 20 years ago, so I'm trying to remember all the details. But it was pretty compelling. I mean, he even showed us, like he was able to go back into that face he would put on when he would go, out and roam the streets and be like everyone was scared of him. And he did that for just a minute in the class, and we saw that face, that look on his face, and we realized, yeah, people were probably terrified of him and people like him. But anyway, he eventually was caught. He did time in prison, and when he was in prison, he got into religion, and in addition to that, he educated himself, which he had never received much of an education. And I believe he was able to complete a college degree while he was in prison. I don't remember how many years he was in prison. But the other thing that was amazing about this story is this was back, I believe, in the 1980s that all this had happened to him. And he contracted AIDS or HIV back, when they didn't really have good treatments or a cure for it or anything like that. Now it's treatable, but back then it wasn't. And he, I believe, contracted that when he'd been on the streets, but he found out about it when he was in prison. So anybody else, I mean, most people would have just given up at that point, and they would have just said, I've ruined my life. He did wake up when he was in prison and realize what he had done to himself. And he had a lot of soul searching apparently to do and that he went through. But the way that this man turned around his life was so admirable, was so amazing, actually. Not only being able to live with himself, with the crimes he had committed, but also being able to deal with the fact that he had this life, death sentence, basically, of a disease. And he did that. He got out of prison. He was able to go to graduate school. He was a very smart person, able to go to graduate school, got a degree in social work, devoted his life at that point to helping other people. And he was only able to do that because he could get past all the horrible things he had done. And most of us had never done things like as much as he did. I mean, obviously, the majority of us have never gone there. But the fact that this person who did so much, that was horrible, that was even evil, some would consider it, and then turned it around to be really an amazing human being. I mean, I went and interviewed him after he had done this class because I was working on a paper for a class that I really wanted to get his, input on. And even when I interviewed him, I was still amazed at the person he had become. He was living day to day. He didn't know this was 2001, I believe. Even in 2001, he had started treatments for his HIV, but there was no guarantee he was going to live more than 6 months, a year, 5 years. He had no idea. And the fact that even with that knowledge of that he didn't know how long he had left, he was determined to do the best he could in his life. Now that was an inspiration to me. It really was. And I look back on that now, and that's what kind of made me think of doing this topic, because if he had let his past define him, he would have ended up, first of all, probably dying a lot earlier. He probably would have gone through a lot more pain and probably inflicted pain on others. But he chose not to do that. It's a choice. It is a choice what we do with that. So when you yourselves are faced with something in your life that is really hard to get past, you've let it define you. You've said, well, how can I do X, Y, or Z because I've done this in my life, right? You have to be able to just say stop in your brain. Yeah, there's a concept in psychology known as thought stopping. You just sometimes have to say out loud, stop, to yourself. So when you're trying to get past something, the first thing is kind of just to say stop so you don't spiral about it. And then I've covered these things on some of my other videos in kind of different format, but you go back to what I call the really basics of moving past something. The first is really look at it. I mean, don't just let it spiral in your brain, but really look at it. Write it out on paper. Write out all the things you think you did or the horrible thing you did or whatever it is. Write it out on paper, then tear it up or, burn it in a safe receptacle. But get rid of it, okay? The second thing is to basically say, I can choose to let go of this now. I can choose to let go of this now because it doesn't have to define my life. It does not have to define my life. And then after that, move forward. Move forward, make plans, make goals, make things, think of the dreams you've had in your life that you still think you can do and accomplish. Then move forward on those. Take the first step, make a phone call, network with somebody, whatever it takes, do that. And if you do this, and it's not an overnight process, absolutely not an overnight process. You are actually going to have to keep doing this periodically until it embeds itself in your brain. Because we don't learn something the first time we do it, basically, especially when we're trying to change a thought process, which when we're stuck in our past with something that we, have let define us, it takes a while to dislodge that in the brain. So you're going to have to keep going through that process. If you're continuing to have like spiraling thoughts, then say stop to yourself, okay? Then the second thing is write it out, tear it up, let it go. Third thing is say, I can move past this. I can get through this. And then take steps to move forward in your life. Take steps to move forward. Of course, part of that whole process is also forgiving yourself for what you did, which I have talked about in previous video, and I'll try to link the one on forgiving yourself up here somewhere, up there. And but I really can't recommend this enough. You have to be patient with it, but it works. All of us, not all of us, many of us have things that we have to let go of because it's held us back, okay? And if you do this, it will make life so much easier. So until next time, be well, keep moving forward, and take care.